There is a moment in every human life when illusion collapses, a moment when the comforting story that someone will arrive to rescue us fades into silence. No hero appears. No miracle descends from the sky, and suddenly you are left alone with yourself. This realization can feel terrifying, but according to the psychological wisdom of Carl Jung, this is not the beginning of despair. It is the beginning of awakening, because the truth is simple and brutal. Nobody is coming to save you, and that is exactly why you must become the one who saves yourself. From the earliest moments of childhood, the human mind begins to build a comforting illusion. It is the belief that somewhere, somehow, there will always be someone who will step in when life becomes too difficult. As children, we fall, and a parent lifts us. We cry, and someone comes to comfort us. We feel afraid, and a stronger hand protects us from the unknown. Slowly, without realizing it, the psyche absorbs a silent promise that when darkness arrives, someone will appear to guide us back into the light. But life, as it unfolds, begins to dismantle this illusion piece by piece. There comes a moment, often painful, often unexpected, when the comforting story we believed for so long begins to crack. Perhaps it happens when the people we trusted cannot understand our struggles. Perhaps it happens when we ask for help and receive silence. Perhaps it happens when we stand at a crossroads in life and realize that no one else can choose the path for us. At first, this realization feels cruel. The mind resists it. It whispers, someone will come, someone must come, yet days pass and nothing changes. The world continues, moving, indifferent to our confusion. The silence becomes louder than any voice that once promised rescue. This is the moment many people interpret as abandonment, but psychologically, it is something far more significant. It is the collapse of illusion. According to the deeper insights of the human psyche, especially those explored in analytical psychology, illusions are not destroyed to punish us. They are destroyed so that we may finally encounter reality. And reality demands something from us that illusions never did: responsibility. For most of our lives, it is comfortable to imagine that someone else will eventually solve the problems we avoid. We believe that one day the perfect mentor will appear, the perfect opportunity will arrive, the perfect support system will emerge to guide us through uncertainty. And while guidance and support certainly exist in the world, the deeper truth remains unchanged. No one can walk the inner path for you. Your confusion cannot be solved by someone else's clarity. Your fears cannot be conquered by someone else's courage. Your purpose cannot be discovered by someone else's decisions. These are journeys that demand your own consciousness. The illusion of rescue often keeps people trapped for years, even decades. They wait for the right moment, the right person, the right conditions. They postpone their transformation because somewhere deep inside they believe that life will eventually provide a solution without demanding their full participation. But life rarely works this way. The truth is, quieter and far more demanding. Life presents you with challenges not because someone will remove them, but because they are meant to awaken something within you. Every obstacle, every confusion, every moment of loneliness is not necessarily a sign that you are lost. Sometimes it is a signal that you are being asked to grow beyond the person you once were, yet growth rarely begins while we are still waiting for rescue. Growth begins when the waiting stops. There is a subtle but powerful shift that happens when a person finally accepts the reality that no one else is coming to solve the deepest problems of their life. At first, it may feel like a loss. The mind mourns the comforting fantasy that once made life seem easier. But after that grief fades, something extraordinary begins to appear. Freedom, because the moment you stop waiting for someone else to arrive, you reclaim something that was always yours: your agency, your capacity to act, your ability to confront life directly rather than observing it from the sidelines. When the illusion of rescue disappears, something deeper emerges from the psyche. A quiet strength begins to form. You realize that the responsibility you once feared is actually the doorway to power. No one is coming to make you courageous, but you can choose courage. No one is coming to create meaning in your life, but you can build meaning through the choices you make every day. No one is coming to rescue you from uncertainty, but you can learn to walk through uncertainty with awareness, and perhaps this is one of the most profound psychological transformations a human being can experience. The shift from dependency to responsibility, from illusion to awareness, from waiting to action. In that moment, life changes in a subtle but irreversible way. You stop searching for a savior outside yourself, and you begin discovering the strength that was quietly waiting within you all along. Deep within every human being lies a hidden territory of the mind that most people rarely dare to explore. It is a place where the rejected parts of our personality quietly exist. The emotions we deny, the impulses we hide, the thoughts we pretend do not belong to us. This hidden dimension of the psyche is what Carl Jung described as the shadow. The shadow is not simply evil, nor is it something unnatural. In fact, it is a natural part of being human. From the moment we begin to grow within society, we learn which behaviors are acceptable and which ones must be suppressed. We are praised for kindness, but discouraged from expressing anger. We are rewarded for confidence, but taught to hide our fear. Slowly, parts of ourselves are pushed into the unconscious because they do not fit the image we want the world to see. Over time, this hidden collection of rejected traits becomes the shadow. It grows silently beneath the surface of consciousness, influencing our actions, our reactions, and even our relationships. Yet most people spend their lives pretending it does not exist. They believe they are only the version of themselves they show to the world, the polite, disciplined, respectable self. But the psyche does not work that way. What is ignored does not disappear. What is rejected does not dissolve. It simply moves into the darkness of the unconscious, where it begins to shape our behavior without our awareness. This is why people often find themselves reacting in ways they do not understand. A sudden burst of anger, jealousy toward someone else's success, irrational fear of failure, or destructive habits that sabotage progress. These are not random flaws in character. Very often they are messages from the shadow asking to be acknowledged. But here is the truth that many find difficult to accept. No one else can confront your shadow for you. Not your friends, not your family, not your mentors, and certainly not society. The shadow belongs to you because it was created by the experiences, fears, and suppressed emotions that shaped your life. And because it belongs to you, the responsibility to understand it also belongs to you. Most people attempt to escape this responsibility. They project their shadow onto others. They label other people as selfish, arrogant, cruel, or weak, while refusing to recognize those same tendencies within themselves. This projection provides temporary comfort because it allows the ego to remain innocent. But psychologically, projection only strengthens the shadow. The more we deny it, the more powerful it becomes. Jung believed that true psychological growth begins when a person turns inward with honesty and courage. Instead of blaming the world for every conflict, they begin asking deeper questions about themselves. They examine their reactions, their fears, their patterns of behavior. Slowly, they begin to notice that the things they hate most in others often reflect something unresolved within themselves. This realization can feel uncomfortable at first. It challenges the image we have carefully built about who we think we are. But discomfort is often the doorway to self-awareness. To face the shadow means to acknowledge that you are not only capable of kindness, but also capable of anger, not only capable of discipline, but also capable of weakness, not only capable of love, but also capable of selfishness. And strangely, this realization does not make you worse, it makes you more whole. Because when you become conscious of your shadow, it stops controlling you from behind the scenes. The anger that once exploded uncontrollably can now be understood and directed. The fear that once paralyzed you can now be examined and transformed. The impulses that once sabotaged your progress can now be integrated into a more balanced personality. The goal is not to destroy the shadow. The goal is to bring it into the light of awareness. Within the shadow often lies tremendous energy, creativity, and strength that were suppressed along with the darker emotions. When these hidden aspects are acknowledged and integrated, they become sources of power rather than sources of chaos. A person who understands their shadow becomes far less controlled by unconscious reactions. They become more aware of their motivations, more honest about their weaknesses, and more compassionate toward the struggles of others. This is because they have seen the complexity of their own inner world. Taking responsibility for the shadow is not an easy path. It requires humility, patience, and courage. It demands that you look at yourself without the comforting filters of ego and denial. But this confrontation with the darker aspects of the psyche is one of the most important steps toward genuine psychological maturity, because the individual who refuses to face their shadow will always be ruled by it. But the individual who confronts it, understands it, and integrates it becomes far more powerful than they ever imagined. They stop running from themselves. And when a person stops running from themselves, they begin to discover a deeper form of freedom, one that does not come from perfection, but from awareness. There is a silent pattern that slowly shapes the lives of countless people, yet very few recognize its power. It does not appear dangerous at first. In fact, it often disguises itself as patience, caution, or preparation. But beneath this calm surface lies a habit that quietly steals years from human potential. That habit is waiting. Waiting for the perfect moment. Waiting for the right opportunity. Waiting until fear disappears. Waiting until circumstances become favorable. Waiting until someone else gives permission to move forward. At first, this waiting feels reasonable. The mind convinces itself that action should begin only when everything feels certain and safe. It whispers that tomorrow will be better, that next month will be easier, that one day conditions will align in a way that removes all risk. But life rarely arranges itself according to the comfort of your expectations. The perfect moment almost never arrives. The deeper psychological danger of waiting is that it slowly becomes a way of escaping responsibility. Instead of confronting the uncertainty of action, the mind creates an endless series of reasons to postpone movement. Each excuse sounds logical, each delay feels temporary. Yet years pass, and the life that could have been lived remains only an idea. Carl Jung often spoke about the unconscious forces that shape human behavior, and waiting is one of the subtle strategies the psyche uses to avoid confronting fear. Because when you act, you expose yourself to the possibility of failure, rejection, and disappointment. Action demands courage, and courage requires stepping into the unknown. Waiting, however, allows the ego to remain comfortable. As long as you are waiting, you are not risking anything. You are not confronting your limitations. You are not testing your strength. You remain in a protected space where dreams can exist without ever being challenged by reality. But the cost of this comfort is enormous. When a person waits too long, something inside them begins to fade. The initial excitement of their ambitions weakens. The belief in their own potential slowly erodes. Eventually, what once felt like possibility begins to feel like regret. The tragedy is not that people lack talent or intelligence. The tragedy is that many never allow their abilities to be tested because they are always preparing instead of beginning. Psychologically, waiting also strengthens fear. Each day that action is delayed gives fear more time to grow in the imagination. The mind begins to construct larger and larger obstacles, convincing itself that the challenge ahead is far more dangerous than it truly is. Ironically, the longer someone waits, the harder it becomes to start. This is why many people find themselves trapped in cycles of hesitation. They promise themselves that tomorrow will be different. They tell themselves that they are still gathering strength, still learning, still preparing. Yet deep inside, a quiet voice begins to ask a difficult question. How long will this preparation last? The truth is that life does not reward those who endlessly wait for certainty. Life rewards those who move forward, despite uncertainty. Every meaningful path in life begins with incomplete knowledge. Every achievement starts with imperfect conditions. No one ever begins fully prepared. The individuals who eventually transform their lives are not the ones who eliminate fear before acting. They are the ones who accept that fear will accompany them and choose to move anyway. Action does something powerful to the human psyche. It interrupts the endless cycle of overthinking. It replaces imagined obstacles with real experience. When you act, you gather information that cannot be obtained through waiting. You learn about your strengths, your weaknesses, and the true nature of the challenges ahead. Each step forward builds momentum, and momentum changes how you see yourself. Instead of identifying as someone who dreams, you begin identifying as someone who does. Instead of living in the world of possibilities, you begin shaping the world of realities. The mind slowly shifts from hesitation to confidence because confidence is not created by waiting, it is created by experience. There is also a deeper truth hidden within this realization. The future you are waiting for is not something that arrives by chance. It is something that emerges from the actions you take today. If you wait for motivation, it may never come. If you wait for courage, it may never appear. But if you act, even in small and uncertain ways, motivation and courage begin to grow from the movement itself. The dangerous habit of waiting convinces people that life will begin later, but life is always happening now. Every moment spent postponing action is a moment that cannot be reclaimed, and eventually, every individual must face a quiet realization. The life they want will not be built by the person who waits for the perfect time. It will be built by the person who decides that imperfect action is better than endless hesitation, and who steps forward even when the path ahead is still unclear. There is a strange and often misunderstood moment that appears in the life of every individual who is destined to grow beyond the ordinary. It is not a moment of celebration, nor is it a moment filled with applause or recognition. Instead, it is a moment of silence, a moment where the noise of the world fades, the support of others becomes distant, and a person suddenly finds themselves standing alone with their thoughts. To many people, this moment feels like abandonment. It feels as though life has removed the comfort and stability that once made everything seem predictable. Friends may not understand the path you feel drawn toward. Family may question your decisions. The familiar structures that once guided you begin to feel restrictive, as if they no longer belong to the person you are becoming. This experience of isolation can feel frightening at first. Human beings are naturally social creatures. We are conditioned from an early age to seek belonging, approval, and reassurance from the groups around us. When that sense of connection begins to weaken, the mind often interprets it as failure or rejection. But psychologically, something much deeper is taking place. Isolation is often the beginning of transformation. Throughout history, every great story of human development follows a similar pattern. Before a person becomes stronger, wiser, or more capable, they are first separated. Roam the familiar world they once depended on. The hero does not begin their journey surrounded by comfort. They begin it by stepping away from what is known and entering a space of uncertainty. This is not a coincidence. It is a fundamental law of psychological growth. When you are constantly surrounded by the expectations and opinions of others, it becomes very easy to shape your life according to their desires rather than your own inner truth. You adjust your behavior to maintain approval. You follow paths that seem safe and socially acceptable. Gradually, without realizing it, the voice of the collective becomes louder than the voice of your own psyche. Isolation interrupts this pattern. When you are alone with your thoughts, the distractions of the outside world begin to fade. The need to perform for others weakens. The masks you once wore to satisfy expectations slowly fall away. What remains is something both uncomfortable and powerful, the raw, unfiltered encounter with yourself. In this space, questions begin to appear that cannot easily be ignored. Who are you when no one else is watching? What do you truly want when the opinions of others are silent? What kind of life feels meaningful to your deepest self? These questions often emerge only in moments of solitude, because solitude removes the external voices that once drowned out the inner one. Carl Jung believed that psychological development requires this confrontation with the self. Without it, a person may live their entire life shaped by the expectations of society, never truly discovering their authentic identity. But when isolation occurs, the psyche begins to reorganize itself. The individual is forced to look inward rather than outward for direction. At first, this inward journey can feel uncomfortable. The mind may resist the silence. It may try to return to the familiar patterns of distract, to seeking validation or reassurance from the outside world. But if a person remains in that quiet space long enough, something remarkable begins to happen. Clarity begins to emerge. Without the constant influence of external approval, the individual slowly begins to recognize their own values, their own desires, and their own fears. They start to see the difference between the life they were expected to live and the life that genuinely calls to them from within. This is why so many transformative periods in life are accompanied by moments of loneliness. The loneliness is not always a sign that something is wrong. Often, it is the psychological space required for a new identity to form. During this stage, a person begins developing inner strength. Instead of relying entirely on guidance from others, they learn to trust their own judgment. Instead of seeking constant reassurance, they begin making decisions based on deeper awareness. Slowly, the center of their life shifts from external validation to internal alignment. This shift is the true beginning of the hero's journey, because a hero is not defined by public recognition or dramatic achievements. A hero is defined by the courage to confront uncertainty and continue moving forward without guarantees. And that courage is usually born in solitude. In isolation, you learn that your worth is not determined by applause. In isolation, you discover that your strength does not depend on constant support. In isolation, you begin to understand that the most important relationship you will ever build is the relationship you have with yourself. Eventually, the period of solitude begins to transform. What once felt like loneliness becomes something different. It becomes independence. It becomes clarity. It becomes a quiet confidence that no longer depends on the approval of others. And when a person returns from the period of isolation, they are no longer the same individual who once feared being alone. They return with a deeper understanding of themselves and a stronger sense of direction. They are no longer simply following the paths that others expect them to walk. They are creating their own, and that is where the real journey begins. There are moments in every human life when pain arrives without invitation. It can appear in many forms: the loss of someone we love, the collapse of a dream we once believed in, the feeling of failure after giving our best effort, or the quiet loneliness that emerges when we realize life is not unfolding the way we imagined. These experiences can feel deeply unfair. In those moments, the natural reaction of the mind is to resist the pain, to escape it, or to search desperately for something that will make it disappear. Human beings are conditioned to believe that happiness is the natural state of life and that pain is something abnormal that should be avoided at all costs. Society encourages us to pursue comfort, stability, and pleasure, while quietly hiding the deeper truth that pain is not simply an interruption of life. In many ways, pain is one of the most powerful forces that shape who we become. When life is comfortable, the mind rarely questions itself. When things are going smoothly, we often continue living in familiar patterns without examining whether those patterns truly serve us. Comfort can create a sense of psychological sleep, where we move through our days guided by habits rather than awareness. Pain, however, interrupts that sleep. It forces the mind to pause. It disrupts the illusions we once relied on. It exposes the weaknesses in our beliefs, our expectations, and sometimes even our identity. What once felt certain suddenly becomes uncertain, and in that uncertainty, a person is confronted with questions they may have avoided for years. Why did this happen? What does this experience reveal about my life? What part of myself must change in order to move forward? These questions rarely arise during periods of ease. They emerge when suffering pushes the psyche into a deeper confrontation with reality. Carl Jung often suggested that the parts of ourselves we refuse to examine eventually appear in our lives as problems, conflicts, or emotional pain. In other words, the psyche has a way of demanding growth when we try to remain unchanged. Pain can therefore be understood not only as suffering, but also as a signal that something within us is asking to evolve. Consider the moments in life that forced you to become stronger. Very often, they were not the moments when everything went according to plan. They were the moments when life challenged your expectations and left you standing in unfamiliar territory. The moments when the old version of yourself was no longer capable of navigating the circumstances you faced. In such moments, a person has two possible responses. One response is to view pain as pure punishment, to believe that suffering is meaningless, that life is simply cruel, and that nothing valuable can emerge from hardship. When someone adopts this perspective, pain becomes a weight that drags them deeper into bitterness and despair. But there is another way to understand suffering. Pain can be viewed as a doorway that leads inward. When a person has the courage to face their pain, rather than escape it, they begin to notice something extraordinary. Beneath the surface of suffering lies information. Pain reveals our fears, our insecurities, our attachments, and our unresolved wounds. It exposes the areas of our life where growth has been delayed or avoided. For example, the pain of rejection might reveal how much our sense of worth depends on the approval, love of others. The pain of failure might expose how strongly we fear imperfection. The pain of loss might show how deeply we were attached to something outside ourselves for meaning or stability. These realizations are not easy to accept, but they are profoundly valuable. They allow a person to understand themselves with greater honesty. Instead of blaming the world for every disappointment, they begin examining the deeper psychological patterns that shape their experiences. This process of self-examination is the beginning of self-discovery. Through pain, we learn about the hidden parts of our personality. We discover strengths we did not know we possessed. We uncover resilience that only appears when circumstances demand it. Many people who later become wise, compassionate, and strong individuals often trace their transformation back to moments of intense difficulty. Pain forced them to look inward. Pain forced them to grow. Without these difficult experiences, they might have remained the same person forever. It is important to understand that recognizing the value of pain does not mean glorifying suffering or pretending that hardship is easy. Pain is real, and it can be deeply overwhelming. But within that struggle lies the possibility of transformation. The difference lies in how we respond. If we resist pain completely, we may spend years running from the very experiences that could have taught us the most about ourselves. But if we approach it with curiosity and courage, it begins to reveal its hidden purpose. Gradually, suffering changes its meaning. Instead of seeing it only as something that breaks you, you begin to see how it can shape you. Instead of believing that hardship only destroys, you begin to notice how it can refine your character, deepen your understanding, and strengthen your inner foundation. In this way, pain becomes more than just an unpleasant experience. It becomes a guide that leads you into the unexplored areas of your psyche. It pushes you beyond the limitations of the person you once were and invites you to become someone wiser, more aware, and more resilient. And when a person finally walks through that doorway, when they confront their suffering and learn from it, they often discover something unexpected. The very pain they once wished to escape was the same force that helped them discover who they truly are. One of the most difficult truths a human being can face is the realization that many of the struggles in life are not only caused by the world outside, but also by the world within. The mind naturally prefers to believe that problems come from external forces, circumstances, other people, bad luck, or unfair systems. And certainly, the world does present real challenges and obstacles. Life is not always just or predictable. Yet, beneath these external events lies a deeper psychological reality that many people spend their lives avoiding. The patterns that shape our lives are often connected to the patterns that exist inside our own minds. Our fears influence the decisions we make. Our beliefs shape the opportunities we pursue or avoid. Our habits quietly determine the direction our lives take. When these internal patterns remain unconscious, they begin to operate automatically. A person may repeatedly encounter the same frustrations, similar failures, similar conflicts in relationships, similar failures of dissatisfaction, without understanding why the same story keeps repeating itself. At first, the natural response is to blame the outside world. It feels easier to believe that people are simply unfair, that opportunities never arrive, or that circumstances are always working against us. But over time, a deeper and more uncomfortable question begins to appear. What if some of this AC patterns are connected to the way we think, react, and behave? Carl Jung emphasized that much of human behavior is guided by unconscious forces. These are the beliefs, fears, and emotional patterns that operate beneath the surface of awareness. When we are not conscious of them, they quietly direct our actions without our permission. In many ways, a person can unknowingly become the architect of their own limitations. For example, someone who secretly fears failure may avoid taking meaningful risks. They may convince themselves that they are simply waiting for the right opportunity, but deep down the real reason is the discomfort of facing possible defeat. Another person might struggle with relationships not because others are always wrong, but because unresolved insecurities create patterns of mistrust, defensiveness, or emotional distance. These internal patterns can quietly shape an entire life. But here is where the realization becomes both difficult and empowering. If our inner world contributes to the problems we face, then it also contains the possibility of change. This does not mean blaming ourselves for every hardship. Life is complex, and many events occur beyond our control. However, the way we respond to those events, the attitudes we adopt, the choices we make, the habits we repeat, are deeply connected to our inner psychology. When a person becomes aware of this truth, something important shifts in their perspective. Instead of viewing themselves purely as victims of circumstance, they begin to recognize their role as participants in the story of their own life. This awareness can feel uncomfortable at first. Accepting responsibility for our patterns means letting go of the comforting belief that everything is someone else's fault. It requires honesty about our fears, our weaknesses, and the ways we sometimes limit ourselves. Yet, within this honesty lies enormous freedom, because if you are capable of contributing to your problems, you are also capable of contributing to their solutions. The same mind that creates doubt can learn confidence. The same habits that produce stagnation can be replaced with discipline. The same fears that once prevented action can gradually be confronted and transformed. The process begins with awareness. By observing your reactions, your emotional triggers, and your recurring patterns, you begin to see how the inner world influences the outer one. Instead of reacting automatically, you begin to question your responses. Why do certain situations provoke fear or anger? Why do certain goals feel impossible even when they are achievable? Why do certain patterns repeat themselves throughout life? These questions open the door to deeper understanding. As awareness grows, the individual begins to reclaim control over their choices. They no longer act purely from unconscious habit. Instead, they begin shaping their actions with intention. This shift may seem small at first, but over time it transforms the entire direction of a life. Gradually, a person realizes that power does not come from controlling every external event. True power comes from understanding and directing the internal forces that influence our behavior. The mind that once created confusion can learn clarity. The psyche that once resisted growth can begin to embrace it. The individual who once felt trapped by circumstances can begin to design a new path forward. In this sense, the realization that you are both the problem and the solution is not meant to discourage you. It is meant to awaken you. Because if all your difficulties were completely outside your control, you would also have no power to change them. But the fact that your inner world plays a role means you possess something incredibly valuable: ability to transform the way you think, the way you act, and ultimately the way you live. The journey is not easy, it requires patience, self-reflection, and courage, but the reward is profound. Instead of feeling powerless against life, you begin to recognize the influence you have over your own growth. And when a person truly understands this, they stop searching endlessly for someone else to fix their life. They begin building the solution from within. There comes a point in every person's life when the illusions that once provided comfort begin to fade. The belief that someone will eventually arrive to solve our deepest problems slowly loses its power. At first, this realization can feel heavy. It can feel as though the world has become colder and more indifferent than we once imagined. We look around, hoping for guidance, for reassurance, for someone strong enough to carry the burden we feel within us. But often, no one appears. Life continues moving forward with its quiet indifference. And in that silence, a difficult truth begins to emerge. The person we were waiting for, the one who would change everything, the one who would bring clarity, strength, and direction, never arrives in the form we expected. For many, this moment feels like disappointment. Yet hidden within this disappointment is a powerful psychological awakening, because the absence of a savior forces us to confront a deeper reality. The responsibility for our lives cannot be handed over to someone else. No teacher, no friend, no mentor, and no partner can fully carry the inner struggles that belong to our own psyche. They may guide us, support us, and walk beside us for a time, but the core transformation that shapes who we become must come from within. To become your own savior does not mean rejecting help from others or believing that you must face every challenge in isolation. Human connection remains important. Advice and support can be valuable, but there is a profound difference between receiving support and depending entirely on someone else to create meaning, direction, or strength for your life. The deeper truth is that the most important decisions, the most significant confrontations with fear, and the most meaningful transformations happen in the quiet space between you and yourself. It is in that space where real change begins. When a person stops waiting for rescue, their relationship with life begins to shift. Instead of asking who will solve their problems, they begin asking what they themselves can do to move forward. Instead of searching endlessly for external motivation, they begin cultivating discipline from within. Instead of expecting the world to become easier, they begin developing the strength to face the world as it is. This shift may seem subtle, but it transforms the entire structure of the psyche. Responsibility replaces dependency. Awareness replaces denial. Action replaces hesitation. A person who becomes their own savior understands that the circumstances of life may not always be fair, but their response to those circumstances remains within their influence. They begin to see that their choices, their habits, and their willingness to confront challenges are the forces that shape their future. This realization does not instantly remove struggle from life. There will still be moments of doubt, fear, and uncertainty. The difference is that those moments are no longer seen as signals to retreat. Instead, they become opportunities to practice resilience. Each time you face a fear, rather than avoid it, you strengthen your sense of agency. Each time you take responsibility for your growth, rather than blaming the world, you reclaim a piece of your power. Each time you act despite uncertainty, you begin building the person you are capable of becoming. Over time, these small acts of courage accumulate. The individual who once felt helpless begins to develop confidence, not the loud, fragile confidence that depends on constant validation, but a quiet and stable confidence that comes from experience. It is the confidence that grows from knowing that you have faced difficulty before and found a way through it. Becoming your own savior also means learning to trust the process of your own development. Growth rarely happens in dramatic, instant transformations. More often, it unfolds through small, consistent efforts that gradually reshape your character. The person you become is not created in a single moment of inspiration, but in countless moments where you choose discipline over comfort, responsibility over avoidance, and courage over fear. Along this path, you begin to realize that the strength you once searched for outside yourself has been quietly developing within you all along. Every challenge you faced, every hardship you endured, every mistake you learned from has contributed to the formation of that inner strength. The journey is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming conscious. It is about recognizing your fears without allowing them to control you, acknowledging your weaknesses while continuing to grow beyond them, and accepting that life will always contain uncertainty. When a person embraces this responsibility, something remarkable happens. They stop feeling like a passive character in their own story and begin acting as the author of their life. They no longer wait for a moment when everything becomes easy. They create meaning even in difficulty. They move forward even when the path ahead is unclear, and in doing so they discover a profound truth that many spend their entire lives searching for. The strength you were hoping to find in someone else, the guidance you believed would appear from outside, the courage you thought you lacked, was quietly waiting within you, ready to emerge the moment you stopped waiting to be saved. And so in the end, the ultimate truth stands clear and unwavering. No one is coming to save you. Life does not pause for your readiness, and no external hand will lift you from your shadows. The challenges, the pain, the fear, they are yours to face, and yours alone. But within that very truth lies the greatest gift, the realization that you already carry the power to rise. When you stop waiting for rescue and begin walking your path with courage, awareness, and responsibility, you awaken the hero who has always existed within you. Your salvation is not given, it is created, moment by moment, choice by choice. And in that act of self-liberation, you step fully into your own life, unshakable, whole, and free.